having a very busy spring. Awesome. Okay, so a couple of quick announcements before we get started for today. As you all know, there is the Briggs field trip if you're interested in attending. What will basically happen is right after class, you can just head over to Briggs, get lunch. Sherilyn was cooking, and her team were cooking all day yesterday to have some delicious things prepared. All the dietary restrictions are fine. Like, you'll be fine. And after that, they'll do a tour. I think they'll be wrapping up in their mind around 3. You can certainly go for lunch even if you can't make it for the tour, right? Like, there are ways to make this work. The food has been prepared. So I think that eating it is actually very much appreciated. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. But I think it's fairly straightforward. As you might have seen in the email, there are multiple addresses that we give out for Briggs. Sherilyn gives one. Our director gives a different one. Sometimes Google recognizes either of them. If you go to East Coast Metal Distributors, it's right across the street. If you just start driving south on South Briggs Avenue, you'll pass a massive garden on your right. It's that one. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. Our other big announcement is next week. What's happening next week? Projects due. Projects due next week, okay? Please, when you turn in your projects, if at all possible, turn in your first review sheet as well. Even if it's just emailing it back when you email in your project. Having that first review sheet is really helpful for us just so that we can kind of be like, did you add the things that were not there, as opposed to having to kind of reread the whole thing really in detail, including that first part. Does anyone have any questions about that? I'll go ahead and say that if you're going to turn it in electronically, you have until the end of the day Thursday, which I think is what it says on your syllabus. So instead of during class, you can turn it in 5 p.m. on Thursday. Okay. And then, so that's next week. Also for next week, your homework for next week was just posted, but it is posted. It's real. You have homework. You don't have a quiz because you guys have enough going on. So please look through the homework. Really, if you can't look through all of it, because I know we're busy and we have projects coming up, absolutely look through there are 2 documents called job aids. They're listed on the internet, but I'll also include them in today's follow-up email. They're short. They're like I think they're both 1-pagers. Just make sure you've seen them because we'll be using them in class. Next week is really all about volunteering itself. So it's a slight change of pace in what we've been learning, but we realized that what happens is we give you guys a huge amount of horticultural training, and then we turn you out and ask you to talk to people. And we actually never talk to you how to talk to people. So we're adding a training component on that. So please do it very minimum, look at the job aids, but all of the homework, there's really actually not much material there. It's like 2 1-pagers, an 11-minute video, and a half-hour video. It's not a huge commitment. So beyond that, yes?
Is class in Chatham County next week?
Not next week, the week after.
The week after, okay.
Yeah, so we have like a crazy schedule, right? This week, Briggs field trip. Next week, project, and please do your homework. And the week after, we'll be in Chatham. And I'll kind of outline that in your emails. So, are we all feeling good? Okay. And then the last announcement that's just kind of a fun one is that Miriam has a lot of plants that she thinks people might like.
I have excess.
She knows she has excess. You want these plants. Talk to her at the break. Can you holler out some of what you got?
I have banana trees, about a dozen banana trees that are coming up. I have some Physostygia. It is invasive, but I saw some at the plant sale. Obedience plant.
It's negative, it's just very aggressive.
It's aggressive.
It's aggressive,
And
yeah.
I have some Salvia romantica, and I may have some elephant ears by the week. So if you want anything, come.
Yeah, talk to her at the break. She's got plans for you. All right. Do we have any other questions?
So, just
Yes.
in 2 weeks is Chatham County. Are we meeting here?
We'll be meeting at Chatham.
Meeting there.
Yeah, we'll be
I
meeting
know
there.
you'll give us the brightest.
Yeah, no, it's good to ask. And that is about an hour drive from here, just under an hour. So, okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Today we have Mart. He is awesome. He is our Orange County horticulture agent. So he's like me in Orange County. Like Matt Jones was me in Chatham County. So we have all these different folks, all part of the network, all part of the resources, and Mart is just always does an amazing job with this class. He's so much fun, so I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Hello, good morning, everyone. Do I need to mic up? I think everyone can probably hear me. I retired from the military, so I have a big booming voice. I retired after 27 years. My wife said, "What do you want to do when you retire?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "You know, when we first met, you were really passionate about extension. Would you ever consider that?" And I said, "I would love to do that. That's my dream job. However, there's no money in it because it's a government job." And she said, "Hey, you know, we'll have your retirement. You know, we'll get it. You know, we'll be okay. You know." And so she pushed me along, and I went back to my master's class at State. Got my degree in extension education, and then came on board in 2016. So I've been in Orange County since 2016. Absolutely love my job. It is so much fun. I don't have the book smarts that people like Ashley have and experience in grafting and stuff like Matt Jones. And I mean, they're absolutely phenomenal agents, but I'm just more of a kind of a practical kind of guy. So anyway, I'm going to show a lot of pictures of my home and show you what not to do, okay? I learned from experience, but first off, before I do that, I'm a tool guy. I absolutely love tools. So I'm going to show you a few tools, pass them around, and then when you see them up here on the screen, you'll kind of understand. Some of them I won't pass around, but they are important. If you're ever trying to get rid of invasive plants, okay, this bad boy, it's called an uprooter, okay, and how it works, you push it up to the stem, and that's how I got these guys out this morning, okay, and see, I brought the whole root system with me, okay, and the way it works is this thing just goes here, and then I'll set the tree down, and I'll show you this in a minute. So the tree goes in here, you step on it, it pulls it, and then you just pry it out of the ground, okay? They
Strong though, right? Big and strong.
yeah, they have smaller ones, but one of the things that I found out about this one that I don't like about it is the base is not big enough whenever I'm really trying to pull up a big one. This will take out up to almost 3 inches in diameter. Okay, so there are certain types of plants that you can get up that are invasives, like privet, that don't have a really bad root system, but once they get established, they're much, much more difficult. But this is a wonderful tool.
Do you have a tool I removed?
What? I've got some resources, and I will share my presentations with you guys. I'll share them with Ashley, and then she'll get them out to you guys so you can have. Yes, ma'am.
What is that you removed?
This is actually a wild cherry,
Oh.
and you can actually see it's in bloom. So we'll talk more about root systems and trees and stuff a little bit later on. Yeah, sorry. I pulled this one out too. Who can tell me what that is? It's crepe myrtle. Yeah, sure is. Crepe myrtle. Good eye. Okay. The next one I'm going to talk about are the jaws. Okay, the jaws of pruners. Okay, very, very important. There's something called bypass, and what that means is the top blade bypasses the bottom blade, okay? And the bottom blade has a little bit of an angle to it. So I'm gonna pass this around. This is a real expensive pair of pruners. I broke them because I used too much pressure. I tried to prune something that I wasn't supposed to. And so I'm just gonna pass it around. Just be careful, they're very, very sharp. But this one has a swivel bottom handle, and I thought that would be really great because they were really expensive. What I found out is I pinch my hand more often than not with that swivel. So I'd rather, so I bought a new set, right? Not swivel type, absolutely love them. And then I looked to pull them out of my truck, and they've fallen on the road somewhere. So that gives me an opportunity to go out and buy a new set. Okay, there is another type of pruner called an anvil pruner. And the blade itself, and I'm going to pass this one around. As you'll notice, you've got the blade itself, and it actually goes down and it cuts onto a flat surface. Okay, that's why they call it an anvil surface. Okay, this one's actually a combination. It has a ratchet, a ratchet on it so that you can really apply pressure on it, but I've broken these two as well because I've tried to, I'm really hard on tools, okay? This is a pair of Fiskars. This is a bypass set of pruners, but you'll notice this one has different kinds of a design, and it's designed to be, to add more leverage, okay? To give you more strength when you're not really strong. This type of ratcheting also does that as well. So that's also a bypass, but just a different design. You can get loppers, okay, in both bypass and anvil, okay? Now, this anvil set, it's a small version of that. I'm gonna pass this around. You'll see that you can really put some leverage on that, but anytime you go out to buy a pair of pruners or whatever, look for a pair that have a really stout set of, either steel or heavy gauge aluminum. And I'll send the bypass ones around as well, so you can see the difference of the two. Couple other types of hand tools that I use in the garden to help. I'll just pass one around. Pass this other one around. Here's something that I found is really cool. There is a company that makes handmade tools, hand tools that are designed for the garden. You can get these in Chatham County when you go down. If you've never been to what's it called, Home and Country in Chatham County, Home and Country, if you've never been there, make sure if you're driving by yourself, it's only about 2 blocks from the garden itself, Debbie Roos's garden, that y'all are probably going to go see. But take time to go to Home and Garden.
Country Farm and Home.
Country Farm and Home. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of off the way. It's just right off the center of town. But anyway, they have these hand tools that are super duper lightweight. So they have a left-handed and a right-handed tool. Okay, so if you're left-handed, okay, you may want to make sure you get the left-handed tool. And the reason is because the rake and how you use the tool is different. The angle of the head itself, where it meets the blade, is literally opposite. It's offset to this side versus this side. Okay.
How would you use that tool?
This is just when you're on your hands and knees and just you're raking, you're hoeing. It's just exactly. It's for weeding.
Okay.
It's exactly what it is. So I'll pass that around. One of the things that I found out anytime I'm gardening is you get fatigued if you've got a tool that's too heavy for you. Okay, so you can have a lot more longevity in the garden if you have lightweight tools that do what you need them to do. Right tool, right job. Okay, so you don't want to use a knife in place of a screwdriver. You don't want to use a screwdriver in place of a knife. Kind of understand that. Other cool things, folding saw. Here's something I didn't know until recently, that Fiskars, I'm told, have the blades are lifetime replacement. Okay, so I haven't tried it out, but I started looking around and said, gosh, I got about 5 or 6 different Fiskar tools. I wonder if I could go and replace that, or get them to sharpen it or something like that. So anyway, Fiskars. What's really cool about this is you can be working in your yard. Stick it in your back pocket, fold it up, stick it in your back pocket. When you need it, you got it right there to be able to use that. So I do expect to get all my tools back, guys. Okay. Here's something else I found that really useful in the garden. A pair of scissors. Okay. How many times have you been out there and had loud noise, somebody mowing the grass? Earplugs. I just keep earplugs there. And gloves. How many of you always need gloves? Everybody? Well, these pair of gloves actually give me dexterity because I still can get my fingertips out there. My little feelers, I can feel around, find those little tubers. Okay, so always looking for different kinds of gloves and stuff like that, as opposed to, you don't have to, you can look in the automotive section, you don't have to look in the garden section always just to find your gloves. Go to automotive, go to Walmart, go somewhere that's cheap and get multiple pairs. Remember we talked about specialty tools? This is one of those, as you notice the handle is bent. This is designed to really dig deep holes and do a lot of prying. The shank actually goes all the way up inside it. So you can tell I put a little bit of pressure on this. But this is a great tool because I can really dig down and try to root out some of those roots and stuff like that, or if I want to do something that you plant a bulb really deep, then I can certainly do that.
Does that have a name? That one?
A shovel, a hand trowel. I don't know. I'm sorry. Okay. No, that's not a horty knife. This is a horty knife. Okay, and my tools are a little bit rusty. Okay, I do apologize for that. I use them, I abuse them. I store them in the back of my truck, and when it rains, they fill up with water, and so I get a little rust on them. But that's not the best thing for it. But horty knife, and this is just an off variety. It's not. But this, it looks similar, okay, but, and this is something that I found recently. I thought I'd never use it. Oh my gosh, it's like an ice scooper. Yeah, but this is fantastic whenever I'm trying to grab soil to fill a small pot. It's got a saw blade on one side. It can really dig if I'm in the soil. It's a really cool tool, and I don't know what the name of that one's called either, but it's fun. And then sometimes I need the ability to chop something. This I found. This one's also Fisker, by the way. It has a saw backing on the back. It also has a chopping blade, okay, on the front. And it's very useful in the garden to get between cracks and stuff like that, to drag weeding and stuff inside of cracks. And that comes with the sheet so you don't cut yourself. So anyway, and then who can tell me what this is? Nope. Nope. It's got a valve on it.
It's for gas.
It's for gas. Okay, so what goes on the backside? Okay, a flame weed eater. A flamethrower. Okay. Why did I only bring you one piece of it? I will tell you, you have to watch your hose, okay, when you're dragging it after you've lit your fire, because I drug it through my fire and I turned around and fire was shooting out my hose because I literally burned the hose off, okay? So you kind of got to be careful, so I've got to repair this, but this is a really wonderful tool. It throws, I think, about 80,000 BTUs of heat. It uses a regular gas tank propane bottle. I use it around the house. The beauty of this is not regulated. It's not considered a fire hazard. Well, I got a funny story to tell you. Last summer, I was using this guy, and it was about 90 degrees outside. The relative humidity was about 10%, and I was killing weeds. Oh, I was having a good time. I was killing weeds around my shrubs, and I had a little bit of mulch there, and so you just have to scorch it enough to change the color from a green to a glossy green. And that's all you have to do, because what happens is the heat itself expands the cells, the plant cells, and they burst, and then it kills the plant because the chlorophyll can't do its job. So all you got to do is just change that. So it's real quick. You just take it, drag it across, and so I was dragging, and then I got a spark into the mulch, and it started smoldering. And so I was about halfway around, and have you ever heard of Carolina jasmine?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that stuff is not called.
Oh, well, yeah. I didn't know that until I found this book called It is. There is a book, and I'll show you. I think I've got a picture of that. But it was like a flaming bush. It is highly flammable. Okay, didn't know it until that, and so now I've changed my theory on what my recommendations to people about what to plant at their foundation. And and I look at this book. It's a native list of flammables, and it's got a green, yellow, and a red. And if it's red, keep it way far away from the house, and you don't want to have ladder fuels because that is certainly something that for a wildfire, could certainly spark that. Okay, so that's enough about the tool. Yes, ma'am.
So, and one note on the flame weeder is that that is awesome. There is also a smaller version of it that takes a small butane tank that's only about this big. It's like a walking cane and a little thing like this. And so if you would just have a small area.
Yep, and that's that. I was actually looking to bring my small one.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it because I took it camping and
because you were weeding.
I was weeding, yeah. No, I use it to actually start the fire. But anyway, I love fire. We'll talk a little bit. I'm also a prescribed burn boss for a prescribed burn association here in Orange County. So if you want to talk about fire, I love fire. Fire is a different subject, and we're not supposed to be talking about that today. So anyway. So, this is my backyard, and I live in the middle of the city, okay? As you notice, he's on the inside of the chain link fence, okay? Anyway, this is what we're going to talk about today. The purposes of plants in landscape, right plant, right place. I know y'all have been talking about that, correct? And I'm just going to hit on a few things. I'm not going to read every single word. That's no fun. You can read yourself. We're going to talk about pruning practices, planting practices, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some interesting plants. Okay, when you select what do you plant, the first thing you got to figure out is what is your desired effect? Okay, what's your desired effect? And what are the growing conditions, and what kind of things do you need to know, and then can I find the plant that I'm looking for? So have you guys looked at the plants database and went through that, and I don't know about your projects, but are your projects tied to identifying plants? This is a wonderful place to go. You can look, I try to teach all my clients to go to this place and start looking. So the more I can educate them, the more it takes the workload off of me. So go here, use that bad boy.
I think I've noticed a flammability rate.
Yep, yes they do. They certainly do. But there's also a publication that has fire-resistant plants for your landscape.
Awesome.
Okay, so again, when you're talking about purposes, what are you going to use it for? And I'm going to give you some photographs in a few minutes, just to kind of give you an example. But you can see, is it a specimen plant? Are you looking for a hedge? Are you looking for flowers or foliage or a certain time of the year? So all those things are important. So when you're gardening, okay, it's not an interior design, right? Okay, right plant, right place, and obviously that's pretty, example of a palm tree that they planted a little too close to the house. I get calls all the time about people saying, "Hey, I've got this tree. Is it too close to the house?" Well, what kind of tree is it? How big is it supposed to get? And if you look on the plants database, it tells you the average height. Okay, but you can usually double that. Okay. Because our growing conditions really, really do well, especially if you've got a little clay there, clay growing. I'm telling you, that clay is not bad soil, okay? People say, you can't grow anything in clay. Well, come to Orange County, I'll show you differently. But conditions, light water, soil pH, how big is that puppy going to grow, okay? Going back to the tree question, we just had a tree giveaway in Orange County. We gave away maple trees, and people were looking for something that they could plant. Now this thing was only that tall, okay? And they said, well, I'm planting it in my yard. How big's your yard? A 10 by 10? Are you kidding me? You know how big this guy's going to get? And so, well, I can't take the tree. I'm sorry. Okay. Right plant, right place. This is my house. Okay. As you notice, this is the walkway. Cryptomerium. Okay. Look how close it is to the light pole. You think that thing produces any light for anybody walking down the sidewalk? They can't even see the number. Okay. This is a Eddie Lauber's walking stick. It's the corkscrew or the twisty. What's it called? Hazelnut. Okay. But anyway, that cryptomerium is now gone. By the way, take a look at this. This is also my house. Okay, this is well before I moved in. Magnolia tree, grandiflora. Okay, look what's up here. The power company come by every year and say, hey, can we cut your tree down? Nope. So they prune off the top of it, and then, because the reason I won't let them is because it's so beautiful. I mean, it blooms all summer long, and it's gorgeous. But you also notice there's a little bit of damage here. And we can talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Okay, this is the street side view of that cryptomerium. Start looking at these shrubs back here. Okay, see how tall that is? Kind of need to do something with that, right? My wife, she won't let me do what I want to do, but she wants what she wants. So the beauty of our marriage is yes, dear, is always works. Okay. So anyway, as you'll notice how tall this area is, a brickwork, right? So that's about 6 feet tall. So as you look from the outside in, it's a lot of exposed brick. So I need to get something on that wall. So there was a cedar tree. It was massive. It was planted right here. I mean, it was huge. So I said, I gotta get rid of it. And then she said, well, I'm so exposed, I can't even sit on a rocking chair and enjoy the outside because I'm totally exposed. And so I said, I'll fix that. I'll plant these beautiful John arborvitae. And so I put one there, put one right there. They are now giant. Those things are taller than our house. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to have to cut those off and put something else there. She needed some cover, right? It's her fault. Okay. So how many of you know anything about hardiness zones? Okay. What is our hardiness zone here? 8. That's right. We have just recently shifted, and basically it's over a 30-year period that they look at the lows and the highs. There used to be something called a heat index, and they figured, that they said, well, okay, if there's a low end for cold, then there should be something on the high end. But they found that didn't. Even they did a lot of studies, and they figured out that didn't work. So anyway, hardness zones are important. We're 8, and so I've tried to push things that are that are more cold hardy, 8, 8.5, 9, just to see if I can get them to grow. And I've been successful with a few things, but I take advantage of something called a microclimate. And microclimates are understanding that closer to the building, you're going to have a temperature gradient, temperature difference. It's going to heat up on the outside, depending on the north-south facing, where the face it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Well, matter of fact, microclimate. What is a microclimate? Okay, I just kind of explained that. Things that cause, if you were to have, for example, these shrubs here could create a microclimate in this area here. It could either be a cold microclimate or it could be a warmer microclimate. Okay, depending on, again, the sun, where it comes and where it hits. What other things like ponds, water holds moisture or holds heat and releases it, but it can also funnel cool air as well. So understanding microclimates will help you adjust Shades, gutters, spouts, they all can affect your microclimates. Light exposure. Got a call yesterday, and they were asking about lace bugs. They said, I've got this terrible problem with lace bugs on I remember, azaleas. They said they were always getting, it's gotten to a problem where the plant is chlorotic and actually dying because it's almost a and so they were asking what to do, and I said, well, let me ask you, where are they planted? And come to find out, the azaleas were planted almost in full sun. Okay, full sun. I said, azaleas really like understory. They like shade. They're shade tolerant. I said, if you can right plant, right place in the shade, okay, we'll go a long way. But anyway, I did make a recommendation to use a systemic insecticide. But the important part of that is the plant takes up that insecticide, and if the plant is in bloom and they take up that insecticide and then it blooms, it's going to kill your pollinators. So you got to make that recommendation. You got to know when to use it, when not to use it. And so what I told him, I said, as soon as your azaleas finish their bloom and they've fallen, then you can apply this insecticide, the systemic, and it will cover it all the way up to next year, okay, to bloom time. So understanding your light requirements is real important. I was just showing Ashley some figs that I have in my home. I've got this fig shrub. It's it's huge. It's probably that big. Okay, half of it produces fruit, half of it does not. And the reason that one half doesn't is because it doesn't get enough sunlight. So what I do is I literally cut it in half, and this side that doesn't produce, I take it away, and every year just grind it up because it doesn't do anything for me. And so I've got these I've got figs that are probably that big around. And what was it called? Help me with the name. Breba, okay? And what that means is it's producing figs, the first load of figs on this thing. It's just massive. And what happened is last year, the fruit buds did not freeze. They went dormant. They didn't freeze. And so the first thing that pops out are leaves and figs. So I've got this beautiful load of figs on my shrubs only on one half because the other side doesn't produce. So I've got figs that I'll have probably in another month ready to eat, okay? Really unusual. Okay, but it's all about light. Light has something to do with that. Drainage. Blueberries are notorious for hating poor drainage, okay? If you've got poor drainage, you dig a hole, you fill it with water, and you come back, 24 hours and that water hasn't gone anywhere, okay, you have poor drainage. When they built our building over in Orange County, they planted 9 blueberry shrubs, and I dug them up this year and replanted them, repotted them, because when I pulled out the shrubs, the roots were black, they were wet, they were sitting in water, okay? So I filled the hole with pine fines, and then I planted them really, really high. So now the shrubs should do okay, but they weren't, they were dying because they had poor drainage. What do you need to know about here? Knowing your conditions, if you have sandy soil, how many of you have sandy soil? Okay, I see a couple hands. Okay, how many of you have clay soils? Okay, great. I love clay. I swear to God, I love clay, but it depends on what kind of clay. I love the orange, the Georgeville clays, the Hendersons, fantastic soils. But they will produce, it takes a long time to drain them. But they do have good drainage, it just takes a while, okay? pH and acidity, this is the easiest thing you can affect if you have acid soils by simply putting lime down. It's the cheapest soil amendment you can add, but only do it if, take a soil sample, don't do it just because you've been doing it every year, before you reseed or overseed. get a soil sample. And I'm sure you guys probably have done it as part of the class. Is that a true statement? Good, good. The pelletized lime is the easiest to use to make that change. It's the easiest to apply. And if you over apply, it depends on how much you over apply. It's really difficult to get the pH back down if you're up at a 7.5 or an 8. It's best not to have to add amendments to bring it down. But never ever apply lime to blueberries. Okay, blueberries, azaleas, some laurels. You don't want to apply any kind of lime for those because they're acid lovers. Okay, obviously the mature rate, we've talked about that already. And don't forget the roots. So I'm going to show you a picture here. And so a guy asked me, he said, well, how much lime do I apply? He got a soil report back. He says, how much lime do I apply? And I said, well, do you have a soil report? He said, yes, I do. And I said, okay, it tells you on there, but let me see what it says. He said, well, I've got these hollies, these Nellie Stevens hollies, and they're about 20 feet tall. And so I said, okay, this is how you do it. And you want to get the radius to the drip line and then double that. Okay, that's how far out the root system goes on most plants. And I'll show you a picture of that here in a few minutes. So right plant, right place. There we go. So if you look, when you have a big tree up close out to the drip line, you're talking, these are mostly anchor roots. Okay, that means it holds it in the ground. They used to be feeder roots when they were really small. And so you take a look at my root system. Okay, you can see there are some that are considered anchor roots down here. Okay, and they're the bigger ones, but these real fine guys are actually the feeder roots. Okay, and so the feeder roots will go out 2 times the distance of the drip line. So the drip line's out to about right here. Okay, so I've torn off a lot of the feeder roots, but you can see the really, really fine ones. Those are the feeder roots. Different trees have different types. Bigger. See, this is a cherry, long cherry. You can see how this, and if you can imagine an oak has a humongous taproot. Okay. Those are the anchor roots. Okay. So we're gonna surprise somebody who's been walking in that door. Right? Okay. So transport roots, feeder roots. Look how far out. So when he asked me, I sent him a formula. Pi r squared is the radius, right? So is the area formula pi r squared? And so I said, try to explain. Multiply pi. No, I said just multiply the radius times the radius, okay, times the 3.14. And I said that'll tell you how many square feet you got. And then double it, and then that's how far out. And then look, and told him how to calculate the formula to get his amount of fertilizer / lime recommendations. Okay, different types of habits or growth forms. And so if you know what the plant's going to look like when you've got a certain spot, kind of understanding what you're looking for. I mean, look at that. This one right here, kind of the lollipop. Okay, lollipop versus pyramid. What is your desired effect for your gardening? Right plant, right place. Okay, going native, if you're interested in specifically, here's some links here that can take you, and then of course the plants database. When you purchase plants, how many of you have purchased plants that come in pots? Most everyone, right? So have you ever pulled the pot out and looked at the root system? Do you think that's a healthy system? Okay, that's root bound, right? And basically what happens is the plant has grown too much, and what can you do for that? Don't buy it. Don't buy it, okay? And so when I go to buy a shrub, they hate me because I go over there and I pound the shit out of them. I hit the side of the plant, and I'll pull the pot off, and I actually inspect it. Okay, and sometimes I'll actually pull my pocket knife out and I'll score it. Well, and this is a plant that I'm going to buy. If I score it with a knife, I'm planning to buy it. Okay, but they come running out. What are you doing? I'm just inspecting the roots. And so that's what I'm doing. I've seen a lot of this before, and what happens is, as it grows, it will actually cut itself in half. It will girdle itself, and the top will die. You see a lot of plants, like this, and this is how they come. You can get them in containers, balled and burlap. And what they do, yes ma'am?
What do you look for when you score?
What I'm doing is I'm looking for different types of roots, the fibrous root system on the inside. I want to score on the outside, kind of tear it open a little bit to see what's on the inside. If you buy something like an annual plant, you'll see a lot of roots that have grown all the way to the plant pot. And what I do is I usually score that whenever I plant it, and I'll show you an example of that here in a few minutes. But I cut those off, and it really stimulates growth, believe it or not. Okay, so anyway, let me go back to this ball and burlap, this one in the middle. What they're supposed to do is something called root pruning. Before they dig those, they go out there the season before and they dig at a 45-degree angle, cutting all the way around, kind of at an angle. And what happens is every time you cut, the plant releases a growth hormone. Okay, so it stimulates growth. So what happens is it creates a more fibrous root system right before they dig that thing up. So you've got a really fibrous root system, and then they pull it up, they put it in a burlap bag. Burlap, and then they send it to you. They usually have a cage. If you've got a really tree of any significant size, it'll have a metal cage on it as well. But when you plant these things, if you're planting a ball and burlap, you need to take the burlap off if you can, preferably. But if the ball decides it wants to fall apart, you just leave it in the ball, leave it in the burlap, and cut the burlap all the way around. Take the top section off, because any of that top section of burlap that's exposed will wick moisture away from the plant. Okay, so that's why you want to get rid of that burlap. And the same if it's got a cage, a metal cage, cut the top of the cage with wire cutters so that it doesn't girdle the system as it gets bigger. Okay, bare root, that's probably the best you can get is bare root. You'll get those in the winter. They need to be planted immediately or almost immediately when you get them. So you're supposed to soak them in water for 24 hours and then take them out and plant them right away. Okay. The reason that they come like that is because they're shipping across state lines and they don't want to send soil with them, so they've got diseases and so forth. Usually fruit trees is what you get like this. Okay. So digging your hole. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any use to taking a plant, a tree or something like that comes in a pot and soaking that in water and getting all the old...
Oh, there are many gardeners that do that. They will actually take that pot, take it to the garden stand, and then spray and remove all the soil away from it. And they actually sterilize them. I'm like, that's a little bit much for me. But they spray it off to get that soil off so they're not bringing any kind of soil contaminants in so that you've got it. But you just need to make sure you get enough soil back into it, packed in there, and settled into those spots when you plant it.
But you could do that at your house.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Certainly. No problem. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the hole that you want to dig, we've changed our methods, okay? We used to say, dig this hole twice as deep as the root ball, twice as wide, and amend the soil with compost and all this beautiful, and fertilize. We've changed that. The reason for that is what we found is those beautiful holes that we were digging, people were planting them way too deep, okay? That was number one. The plants were taken off because we fertilized them. They were hitting the wall and they were going around in circles and instead of planting. So what we're now recommending is we dig a hole, just a little bit to where that root ball will sit in, maybe a little bit shallower because you're going to put a layer of mulch up here, right? So you dig it just down to the bottom so that root ball will sit on the bottom of that hole without being too low. Okay, twice as wide. Okay, and so that the root system can go out and down. Okay, so twice as wide, only the depth, and then you don't need to necessarily add amendments. You can put a little bit of compost because everybody wants to do it. They feel that that's what their grandparents did, so I got to do it. I got to do it too, and then you put the back spoil back into it. You break it up a little bit, and then these edges here. What I tell people is I'd rather just put some sharp edges along that hole instead of being real smooth, so that the roots don't do this. They dig in. Try to be able to dig in. Okay. There's also another way of guiding. I'll show you a couple methods here in a few minutes. But you see how this is showing the depth, so that it's about 2 inches by the soil line above. So the collar or the root flare is right here. You don't ever want it to go deeper in your hole where the root flare is below the soil line. Okay, we were talking about scoring the edges. So here's an example of trying to tear this thing apart. How many times have you gotten a plant that you have roots that are real fibrous roots, but it's like a layer, right? So what I do is I just take my knife and I whack that off. Just cut it off, 2 inches, okay? And then I take my knife and I start cutting this way, okay? And then I'll go this way, and that's stimulating growth, okay? And then I stick it in the hole, backfill it, and I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I do anyway. I always step it in, okay? Just to make sure that it's got good firm contact with the bottom of the hole. When I get my soil, I pack it in a little bit around. I fill it, put water, get it half full. I put water in it to water it. Then I fill it again, and then I step around to make sure I've got that good soil contact all the way around. And then I'll finish it off. So what this is showing is kind of that ball burlap where they're breaking up that ball a little bit to expose the roots so the roots will go out. Yes, ma'am?
When you step it in, do you do it like?
Not real hard, not enough to compact it.
Yeah, do you do it like parallel to the roots or perpendicular?
Perpendicular. I just to get it in, I want to have enough pressure to make sure that root ball is not going to blow over in the wind. Okay, and that's real important. We'll talk about guiding here in a few minutes. But if you can see, this is like a bare root. Oh, somebody's dancing upstairs. So this is kind of what it would look like. And then sometimes you can actually build a little mound here at the bottom, spread the roots open at the bottom, cut it right in the middle, and then kind of spread it open. And this is kind of what it looks like. As you notice, it's a little bit higher. They're backfilling. And then they put a little donut on the edge. And the donut is nothing more than kind of a water containment, but it is the soil level. When you put your plant in the ground, you don't want it any more than where that root flare. There's a flare. Go over here, try to show you that. Okay. Can you see where the soil line was? Okay, the soil line was right about here. See how much is still above the ground? So this limb was above the ground, right? Okay, but as you'll notice, there's a flare right here at the very bottom that flares out from the top. And it'll be more evident, I think, with some other pictures here. But this is a new tree. Okay, mulching. How many of you have seen the volcano mulch? Everybody, right? Okay, so why do they do that? Okay, why do they mulch anyway? What's the purposes of mulching? Moisture. What else? Protect the roots. How? What's that?
Weed suppression?
Well, weed suppression, yes. Okay, to protect the roots from
People walking on
and mowing.
or following around.
and weed eaters. That's how you're protecting those root system. Okay, moisture is probably the number one reason to hold that moisture in. It cools the soil. There's a lot of reasons to mulch, but a big one is that people that do yard maintenance love weeding, and if you got weeds in there, they're going to come up and they're going to get as close as they can. And to kill a tree, all you have to do is cut less than a 1/4 inch all the way around. It's called girdling a tree, okay? Because that cambium layer is only less than a 1/4 inch thick, and it's just behind that bark layer, okay? So if you, remember that tree I showed you earlier in my yard? We'll go back to it. You'll see it a little bit later on. Okay, there's different types of guiding or staking a tree. We're actually recommending that you only stake no more than a year, number one. And the only reason you would ever stake is to prevent the tree from falling down, okay, in high winds. If the ball itself is strong enough to hold that plant from falling over, when you plant it, you don't need to guide. So if you're doing bare root, that's the time that I would only recommend, in my opinion, that you really need to guide. And you put a single stake right next to it, and then within the first year, you put it relatively loose so that the tree can move, because that builds resiliency. Okay. Yeah. So, and then this is a 2-stake method, and the 3-stake using wires. But again, these wires shouldn't be tight. Okay, shouldn't prevent it from moving. It's designed, the tree should be able to move, sway in the wind, right? There's also another type of staking that we're now recommending, and it's kind of like an H bracket. You drive a stake on one side of the tree, you drive a stake on the other side of the tree, and you put a piece of wood across that, and it's usually pine, pine furring, untreated wood. It's right there on the ground, and it's literally holding the root ball. Instead of the root ball being able to shift, you're supporting the root ball itself, and then you mulch over it. So what happens is the wood can rot away, the termites can get it, rot away. Within a year, it's gone, it's out of sight. Nobody even knows it's ever been guided. Okay, so that's kind of what we're recommending. I don't have pictures of that, but if you go into some of the resources, Barbara Fair, she talks about that pretty well. Okay, taping. How many of you have seen this? Okay, usually you'll see this in orchards. It's not necessary. How many of you have seen tubes that they, okay, how many of you use tubes? Okay, it's not recommended, and the reason, remember when we talked about microclimates? What happens inside those tubes is they create a microclimate, and the tree itself doesn't go fully dormant in the winter, then you have a hard freeze, and then it kills the tree. Okay, so that's why we recommend, and these wrappings, if you have problems with deer, you need to do something a little bit more than just a wrapping like this. You need to put a cage around it. With barbed wire or something. No, just so fertilizing. Okay, don't recommend fertilizing when you first plant. Do your soil sample before you plant. Whatever lime recommendations they tell you, do that. You can put in the phosphorus and the potassium and mix that in. You can incorporate those across the whole area, but not specifically for the hole. But tree stakes, we found that they're not really efficient. They don't do what they really are intended to. Okay, this is only talking about nitrogen. And as you notice that the tips are green. And so what's happened is the rest of the plant has starved the plant to support the tips. And so that's why they're turning yellow. It's just a nitrogen deficiency. How much water do we need? Okay, first year in establishment, usually 1 to 2 acre inches of water per week is kind of what is needed. When I say an acre, inch of water, how much is that? Oh my God, 27,000 gallons. No. What you need is basically, if you can imagine an inch of water for the perimeter, that's probably about a 5-gallon bucket, once a week. Okay, but it depends on what kind of soil you have as well. If you've got sandy soil, you may put half a bucket twice a week, okay? Because the water's going to go like that through sandy soil, and clay, it's just going to percolate real slow. How many of you have seen the growing bags, the bags you put around your tree? Those work okay, it's slow release and lets water, But if you're mulching really well and you water it, just 5 gallons of water, you'll be good. Okay, how many of you have seen this? Anybody ever seen this? Okay, usually that's an indicator that the tree is under stress. It's the last flag. It's taking its dying breath. And usually, and what happens is it starts at the extremities and it starts dying back. And then it says, okay, I'm going to try really hard. I got to photosynthesize, and it pushes out these systems like this, and several years later, the tree will be gone. I've seen an exception. My neighbor had a dogwood tree, and I saw this. I said, man, you're going to lose your tree. And he said, no, I won't. I said, yeah, you will. You need to prune it back, or you need to do something. You got problems. But he proved me wrong. It came back, and it's looking beautiful. It was a beautiful dogwood. So these are those shoots that we were talking about, the epicormic shoots. Who can tell me what this is?
Right. The epicormic.
Yep.
Is that anything that's like along like?
Those are like water sprouts you're talking about. That cornmeal, yeah.
Well, that whatever that photo was.
Yeah.
I was trying to understand this photo. Could you say more about?
They're actually coming out of the stem, the trunk itself. These are actually from the trunk. There's little buds that are literally behind that bark that are trying to, and so probably the top of the tree is gone and dead already, and it's like and it's usually, this is an indicator. Yes, sir.
Is this also true in grafting situations?
Yeah, well, okay. Yes and no. Okay, usually what happens if you've got a grafting situation and you see something that is budding, that is shooting out water shoots that are coming out below the graft, if you were to try to take that and replant that, you're not going to get the same thing that was above the graft, because that grafted, usually, for example, they take American persimmon, great example, American persimmon, and they graft on it an Asian persimmon, okay? And then you have these big baseball-sized fruits that are seedless, they're tasty, they're non-astringent, and then you get this shoot that comes out over here. You cut the root and you nurse it and you put that in the ground. What you're going to get these little tiny seeded, very turn your mouth inside out persimmons that you say, what happened? Well, it came out. It was a water shoot that came out below the graft. Okay, whatever they use, that's the original. What you're going to get. Okay.
So just to be clear though, this piece about it, this is the last gasp I've heard of a tree that's been severely damaged. In the grafting scenario, is that true, or is it just common for grafts to shoot off their?
Below the graft, it's pretty common.
Okay.
That's pretty common to see water shoots that come out along the stems and stuff like that. And that's not necessarily what they're. It is just. It's just expressing or trying to survive. Is really what's going on.
So, question: should you cut them off?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cut them all the way to the ground, as close to the ground as you can.
Okay.
Okay. So what is this again?
Crepe myrtle.
This is actually at my house. I did this cut. You can see where you can see this size. There was a split here. I thought it would be good. So now what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll trim these off, just to get rid of them, because I don't want that. I'm going to show you and you can see how this is what I really wanted. Okay, this is what I had 4 or 5, and then I cut this one off right here, so I went in and cleaned that up. I'll show you an example when we talk about pruning crepe myrtle here in a minute. Crepe pomerium. This is one of those where I just wanted to show you this. See how brown and dead looking this is? That's because it is dead and dying underneath. That's normal. Okay. If I were to prune, and I prune green all the way back past this last bud of green, it will die. Okay, but if I'm out here doing some light pruning and I cut some of this out here, it'll come back green. Okay, I can't explain why, but maybe you can tell me.
They don't have adventitious buds down farther, and so if you go back into that brown area.
Okay, advantageous buds. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's one of the weird things you have to be careful with pruning needled evergreens in general. Is there's a whole group of
So
them.
if you cut those, if they're dying and you cut them, because I have one and I feel like now I can't reach it because I have to hire, so I kill those.
Yeah, anything below
dying
that. Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, you want to be really careful to. Yeah, I mean, if it's dying anyway, you can't bring things back from the dead, so that's rough. But in general, you want to be staying in the green area because once you're into brown, they're not going to resprout the way you would
So
expect
you
them
might as
to.
well cut them.
So there are some that are a little bit different and I think I can't give you an example of one right now, but there are certain junipers that you can cut back and they actually will bud all the way back to the trunk. Yes, ma'am.
I have a really big weeping willow, a curly willow, and I've been doing the same with that because underneath it, it's really dying, it's dead, and so I've been trimming that out. Is that usual, or is there something else going on with that?
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Okay, remember we were talking about that tree, that magnolia? Okay, look at the damage. How do you think that happened? That was a lawnmower. A lawnmower, whenever it was young, came up and it knocked off the bark on the outside. And so it calloused over. You can see it's healed, but the wood is exposed. But it's also trying to shoot up these apical stems. Okay, what's going on over here? What kind of woodpecker? Sapsucker. So does that mean that tree's got insects in it? Okay, what do sapsuckers do? They create what's called a sap well. They go in, they peck. I wish I would have brought. I had this beautiful stem that one of my clients brought in. But anyway, they drill a hole, and what happens? It injures the tree enough for it to weep. Then and they'll do it in rows. And so that's how you know it's a sapsucker because they're in rows. And so that sapsucker will come back day after day and they'll drink from the well, the sap well. And what happens is also it attracts insects. And so they're eating the insects that are attracted to the sap to get their proteins, and they're getting their sugars from the tree itself. So that's what's going on. Normally a sapsucker won't kill a tree per se or a shrub. You can see really major damage almost to a point where it will girdle. I have seen some that have actually died, the upper portion died, but it really pushes all that energy. The energy has nowhere to go, so it pushes out stems and everything. So it's a natural occurrence of pruning, natural pruning of that tree. I've got some viburnums that have just, it looks like it was tiger stripes on it, and it's just barely, and you see a leaf here and there that's still green, but it's due to sapsuckers. Yes, ma'am.
And that put on the left.
Yeah.
Or I guess, yeah, when you're saying they'll put out shoots to try to they're under attack, so they put out shoots.
Right.
Were you saying, maybe you already said this, but I missed it. Were you saying you should prune those back?
I do. I go in and cut this off. This one's really, it's healthy on the top. This right there, it's just putting out some shoots out here, and so I just keep it pruned up or attempt to anyway. Okay, I actually dug up some of those the actual ones that came up out of the root system and replanted them.
Okay.
So why do we prune? Okay. Dead, disease, dying. That's the first thing that goes, right? Usually you're trying to improve the canopy. You're trying to raise it up so you can mow underneath. Aesthetically, you want to. In your mind, you have some, idea of what you want it to look like. Dead, disease, dying, damaged, or deranged. Okay. So when we talk about pruning, the first thing you want to look at anytime you come up to something to prune it, I tell people if it's a safety issue, prune it immediately. Don't wait. Don't wait for the right season. Just prune it. Okay. If it's dead, you can prune it any time of the year. If it's dying, okay, it's kind of you can take it off, take part of it off. If it's crossing. Okay, and crossing, I'll show you an example here in a few minutes, but the plants rub together when the wind blows. It creates entry points for disease, and so by taking off one of those branches to prevent that rubbing, that friction, that entry point, you're actually protecting your tree. So again, looking at aesthetics, what are you after? Okay, what is the difference between pruning something like this, okay, single trunk versus multi-trunk, okay, and how is the proper way to prune like a multi-trunk? You take out the whole stem from all the way down to the bottom, and so that's kind of the concept when we're looking at crepe myrtles. That's what I tell people. I said, hey, if you're going to prune crepe myrtle, don't cut off the whole top. Don't just cut a branch here, a branch there. Take it all the way back as low as you can get, and so you keep the form so that it looks like a crepe myrtle. Okay, we have a website in Orange County. It's called theorangegardener.org that has a lot of pruning tips. It's got a lot of information about garden sites. If you're interested, jump on there, look around. We're in the process of revamping it, but anyway, it's there. Okay, this one's kind of hard to see. We're going to talk about crotch angles. Crotch angles. So what do I mean by a crotch angle?
An angle that the branch comes off the tree.
Okay, that's right. So if you'll take a look at this, okay, you see that angle kind of looks like a V, and then look at this one, okay? That's more of a 45-ish. 45 is good. 45 is good. Anything, less 30, 20, 10%. So take a look at that tree up there. That's in my backyard. I've been wanting to get somebody to come out and cut this thing for the longest time, but they just want to charge too much. But as you see, okay, what happens is that angle right there, those two can break apart, split right down the middle, and then I'll lose the whole tree, okay? Luckily, it's so tight in there. This is an oak, they're oaks. They're almost brother and sister, and it's going to be hard to get them apart. Take a look at this one. Look at the branch, the angles, okay? You got 4 massive areas right here in this one point. Okay, that makes a really weak tree. Okay, types of pruning. Okay, when we prune, how much time? How are we doing? Okay, I'm going to speed up a little bit because I can talk all day.
Well, you actually have until 10:30, and then you have an hour after the break.
Okay, all right. Okay, so when you do a pruning, this is kind of important. There's different types of pruning. There's a tight center. If you look here, this is upright, more of like apple trees have a tight center where they got it all massed together. And then you have an open center, okay, where would be something like peaches, plums, persimmons, Asian persimmons. And then I actually do something on mine called an, God, what do we call it? It's a modified open center, where I have the center is open, but then it goes up a branch, and then I cut the at the first scaffolding, then I'll cut in the middle, cut the main stem, and it's open. It's like open like that. And so what I'm trying to do is to expose more sunlight to the center of the tree itself, so it has more photosynthesis opportunities. Okay, and that's why you do that. So we talk about pruning. This, I think I've got another slide. Okay, right here in the middle, this is called the branch bark ridge. And this portion right here is called the collar. Okay, and this is the proper pruning cut just outside the collar at about a 45-degree angle to the bridge bark ridge. Okay, and I think I've got, just look. Maybe it's a little bit further on, I'm sorry. There's heading cuts. Heading cuts are the ones that you cut just the tip. Okay, you're cutting the head off, and what you're trying to do is to create more of a bushy opportunity below the heading cut. And you can create a directional cut. If you'll look at this picture here, okay, it's a heading cut, and then what happens is you have buds below this that pop out, and then this one right here pops out. So that's a heading cut. Here's an example, heading cut, taking this top section off. And then what happens, this is an example of how it's bushed out, where that was the heading cut. Okay? Heading cuts are really good when you got really fine leaves, such as this type of topiary. Fine leaves, okay? Reduction cut, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to get, you'll see these are those branches that are popping out below that. So you've got your cut here, and you've got what they call a dwarf that is a dominant. And so what will happen is the energy, when you cut this off, it needs to have at least a branch, at least 1/3 of the whole mass over here, so the energy can go that way. And so that's what it looks like right here. This one is an example of that. So heading versus thinning or reduction. So it just shows you the first year and then a year later. So removing the tip, and then the buds here and here. Okay, cutting here, buds here, here, or these two. This is the first year. Okay, it's a thinning. Okay, they're wanting to direct the energy up here. Okay, but what's happening in the first year, so you've got a bud here and here, so your energy here, okay, and then the bud here has got these leaves here. Make sense? Okay, this is the modified open center. This is year 2, and then this is year 3. So what's happened, I cut the center out here, and so I've got a 3-way scaffolding coming over here. It's actually shooting it, and then I've got another one coming out. Then up here I'll cut to open that up. This guy just fruited. This last year was the first year I've got fruit off of it. So I'm very happy with that one. Okay, rejuvenation. You're going down and you're really taking a hard cut. You do a rejuvenation probably with roses. Would be a real good example where at the end of the season you cut them to about here, and then as the season in the spring you go down, you cut them down to about that tall, and that would be an example of a rejuvenation cut.
Can you do something like that with a holly?
You can, you certainly can. It depends on how hard you're going to cut and how far back you're going to cut. I would say be careful. That's what I was trying to do with those Nellie Stevens and in front of my house, and I've kind of butchered those guys. I was experimenting. I was doing what my wife says. So she said she wanted privacy, but anyway. All right, here's an example. Okay, Nellie Stevens. This actually had 2 branches. I don't know if you can see it. I went out and took one branch out. with the intent of hoping that it would expand out. And I had one on the other side right here as well. I did the same thing on both sides, and it was a total disaster.
On your previous slide, you talked about extensive rejuvenation for dogwoods. Is that including like the Benthamidea dogwoods?
No, not dogwood. No, I was saying my neighbor had a problem with his dogwood. He had I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay. What was your question again?
No, I was just checking because I that seemed odd to me. To
No,
do extensive
no.
rejuvenation on a dogwood.
No.
Okay.
No, not rejuvenation. I was talking about how his had the epicoral shoots, and I said, your tree's gonna die, and he said, nah, and it didn't survive. He was wrong. Okay, but anyway, let's go back to Ridgebark Ridge. This, if you look at any kind of plant, you have to look really close, but you'll see this. There's kind of like a line there. Okay, and then there's something called a collar. The collar is this area right here. So when you cut, you never want to cut past into the tree or straight down, because the collar itself is the tree's mechanism, or its mechanism for recovery. And so I've got some pictures. You can really see the collar here really well, where it's healing over. This dead branch can be cut off just outside the collar, and it'll be fine. But you want to cut about 45-degree angle from this Ridgebark Ridge, okay, and outside the collar. That's the proper pruning cut.
I have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
So this company, Leaf and Limb, they say this 3-cut where it's almost like.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the 3-cut here in just a minute. Okay. There's some pruning references. Again, before the cut, tools to make the cut, how to prune, very good references. Again, I will send the presentation so you'll have that, but please go in there. They're great references. How to prune specific plants. This is a really interesting spreadsheet. It's a pamphlet that you can download for free. It tells the bloom time, on old growth, on new growth. It tells you what's the function of the hedge screen, how the shrub, what you're using for, the primary features, and the pruning time. So you can download this thing, look up your shrubs. The ones that you really have to be careful with are the hydrangeas, because some hydrangeas are early blooming, some are late blooming, and to know when to properly prune them. My mother, she gave me 2. She said, I've never got these things to bloom. I put them in the ground and didn't touch them, and they bloomed for me beautifully. It was because her yard person was pruning them. And so he was pruning off all the beautiful blooms before. And so I sent her pictures and said, look at these beautiful guys. Okay, so we're going to talk about the three cuts. Okay, and the first cut, and I'll show you an example. The first cut you're going to do is a small cut on the underside of the limb. Okay, the second cut, what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove the weight of this tree without damaging the tree before you do the third cut. So you do a first cut here, second cut to cut the limb off, and then third is the final beautiful prune cut. Okay, I'm going to show you that here in a minute. Yes, ma'am?
I had a question of reading that and understanding. I understand what the point of those 2 cuts and to prevent the tearing of the bark. But I had a hard time seeing how that could really happen.
Okay, I will show you. I will show you. Okay. So let's talk about, again, we're talking about that collar. This is what the collar is supposed to do. It calluses over, and it covers, kind of rolls when it's properly healing. So this collar is not healing as well because it was torn out here at the bottom. It was cut into the collar. Okay? So that's the reason the 3 cuts.
But do you start at the top of the branch?
I'm going to show you right here. Okay, so here's the first cut.
Right.
Okay, and so as you cut the second one, it goes down, it hits as the weight starts bending. Okay, you're trying to relieve the pressure. It's pulling it down, pulling it down, pulling it down. Okay, and then what happens at some point where the first cut you made under, it rips it off. See, that's what's happened here. Okay, it tore it. Okay, so now you have the rest of this branch. You've got a stub that big, so you release the weight of that branch. And now you can go and do the proper cut to get that third cut in.
Oh, I see that. Okay, so that, okay, maybe I'm dense. I did not see that they were cutting it all the way through.
Yeah, yeah. So the first cut here, it's a relief cut.
Yeah,
Second cut up here, and then third cut is back here.
totally get it now.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. And so again, here's the third cut. Remember we talked about the Branch Park Ridge, the collar. This is the collar here. Okay, and so it's outside the collar at a 45-degree angle. Okay, and this is just, again, showing the collar itself. Okay, only thing this is really showing is how close you can cut to the node. Okay, this is the next node. So if you cut this off, you cut at an angle like this, you cut below the node itself. And so you may lose this node, and this right here, this top piece will die. So they're just telling you, cut it at an angle, cut it a little bit above the node, just don't get it too at a really wonky angle. Okay, these are flash cuts. These are the ones that are cut past the collar. You can see the collar was out here, okay? And this is part of the collar. They just cut it off. And so if you cut into the collar, it's going to take a lot longer for that tree to heal, if it ever will. Okay, never use paint, tar, anything like that. What happens is you end up sealing in disease spores and stuff. You're helping disease attack it. If it can dry out, it will save it. Okay, we've already talked about pruners. We've talked about when to prune. Okay, light pruning can 5 to 10% can be done pretty much any time. And again, if you have a safety issue, do it now. I had a person call me and says, hey, I've got this beautiful fig tree. Is it the right time to prune it? I said, no, it's not. It's a little bit too late. And she said, well, my neighbor keeps complaining because they can't see around it when I back out of the driveway. And they about hit me twice. And I said, it's time to prune it. So understand, pruning, if it's a safety issue, prune it now, okay? Don't wait. Kind of a rule of thumb, when you're pruning, a third of the plant, no more than a third when you prune it at the right time of the year. And remember the chart I just showed you earlier? Go back to that. That's a beautiful chart. It works for here in North Carolina. It's a right time, right plant, right time to prune. When do you not want to prune? Okay. I tell people probably today's the 10th. Today is not the day to prune. Okay, we just had a hard frost warning. If I would have pruned last week, when it was beautiful and warm, I would have had a lot of lost plants. The tips, because what happens is it stimulates growth. They're very tender, and then you have a freeze, then boom, you lose it. Okay, lose those tips. So when not to prune is right before when everything is starting to pop out. Don't prune then. Wait till after the last frost day. For example, I will prune figs probably 2 weeks from now. Anything that's dead, the tips that have frozen, I'll prune those off. I'll do some really, I'll know what's alive, what tissue's alive, and I'll go in and I'll prune heavy. Because figs can take heavy pruning. Blueberries, they need to be pruned before the buds start swelling. Muscadines, grapes, they need to be pruned in the winter when it's cold, when they're dormant, because they'll bleed to death if you go in and try to prune now when the sap is running. So if you hadn't pruned them, muscadines love to be pruned, by the way. You will get tenfold more grapes if you prune it at the right time of the year than if you don't prune it. Okay, so make sure you prune your muscadines. Late summer and the fall, when it's when you don't want to stimulate growth when it's trying to go dormant, late fall is the best time, I think. During a drought, yeah, not smart to prune when it's really under stress anyway. I will tell you another, ambrosia beetles. How many of you have heard about ambrosia beetles? I was called out to a home association. They said they've got these toothpicks things sticking out of all their crepe myrtles, and it was the whole neighborhood. I walked around and there was only 2 trees that did not have any, and the only reason they didn't have any, it was ambrosia beetles, was because the guy wouldn't let them prune them. They were inside of his home if that makes sense. He had a house, and it was like in his garden. They were relatively small, and the rest of the association had, they were out in the middle, and they were beautiful trees. But what happens is that alcohol is produced whenever the tree is under stress. They pruned it at the wrong time of the year. The crepe myrtles the ambrosia beetles came flying. They drill a hole they poop out this extract that looks like a straw. They form a fungus that actually kills the tree. So there was not much they could do at that time. It had already been infected, and so they lost all their crepe myrtles. Okay, again, that's that fig tree that I was telling you about. Blueberries. Yeah.
Can you keep topping off, like, if you don't want them to go too big, can you just, is it dead?
Are we talking?
Figs?
Yeah, you certainly can. You can.
Anytime, just-
Yeah, you can take, but remember the figs kind of grow along the stem, and on new growth. Okay. Crepe myrtle. How do you like that? Take a look at this tree, and this tree. What's the difference between these 2 trees? This is actually the same tree after this was pruned. Okay? Can you see a difference?
Yeah.
Okay? But can you really see a difference up top? It doesn't look like this, does it? Okay? That's the natural form of a crepe myrtle, what it should look like. And by going in and selectively removing some of these main trunks low, going all the way down to the bottom, keeps that beautiful form without killing it. There's something called pollarding. Okay, they do this in Europe, and I've seen this around a lot of places around in Orange County. It looks ugly when they first do it, but again, what they're doing is they're keeping it to a set height, and this will be beautiful after that goes away. I mean, after you don't see that anymore. Once it starts popping out in the spring. Okay.
So what is the difference between pollarding and then just like?
You're actually keeping the same growth point every year, and so you see these new nubs or pop. That's where the new will pop out. It keeps the height down. Some people like this. In Europe, they love the pollarding because it looks like nubs of hands. I don't know.
But it's not as bad as like just doing heading cuts.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And because you're keeping it every year, you're doing the same place, and you're keeping that height down to the same growing point, basically. So if you look at this, this would take a lot of pruning, but it's possible. Okay, so pests and disease, I'm going to go real quick. Powdery mildew, you know what this is. The lace or the aphids on the bottom side, sooty mold. What happens is the aphids or plant suckers, they extrude sap, honeydew, they call it honeydew. It falls down on the limb below, and then a mold, sooty mold, grows on that fungus. So what can you do about this? Okay, believe it or not, we recommend high pressure water, okay, on the bottom side of the leaves. I tell people, hey, get some Dawn dishwashing detergent, put your, low pressure, wash the leaves, crepe myrtle, wash the leaves if they start turning black like that, and then turn it on high pressure and rinse it off. What happens is it blows these guys off to where it's a threshold, that's below a threshold that's going to continue that. It helps wash the leaves. It's relatively easy to do. Choosing crepe myrtles. Mature size, that's important. You can see the different sizes. Look at the habits. We ever use crepe myrtles in this area if you haven't figured that out already. Let's see, bald cypress is another good one, but look at the size. Okay, river birch, 40, 30, what do you think's going on here? You think they're gonna have a problem? It's beautiful bark, but I think you'd have a problem with that. Okay, tulip poplars. So red buds, dogwoods, okay, some diseases. The Kousa, I absolutely love, my neighbor has a Kousa dogwood. I keep planning to go out at midnight sometime and get a sample and bring it home. Okay, what are your questions, guys? Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit more about watering and how to understand how much to...
Okay, it's nothing but math. Okay, if you look at whatever the footprint is, how many square feet, and you think about 10 square feet, and if I were to put an inch of water, 1 inch for 10 square feet, how much water would that be? And there's calculators out there that can help you figure that out. Just Google convert 10 square feet to 1 inch of water. How many gallons is that? And Google will kick that out for you and tell you. So I'm not being facetious because I do it all the time. Yes, ma'am.
If you've got a drip system, though,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure how you would calculate that.
That's a great question. There's actually an emitter that are rated, and literally you put that on your drip system itself, and it tells you, it says like half a gallon per hour, 1 gallon or 2 gallons per hour just per emitter. If you have the ones that have the Rainbird, the brown hoses, and they're spaced every 6 inches or 12 inches apart, those are rated at a specific metered amount of water. And so, or what you can do is if you have a specific, like you're doing a whirlybird, you know what I'm talking about, the micro, you can actually put that in a container and measure it for a minute, and then multiply it times 60 for an hour, and it'll tell you how much water that is. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So what would you consider like a deep water for a new plant? Like
Deep water?
yes, like I don't.
What kind of soil do you have?
Clay, loamy.
Okay, loamy clay. Okay.
More clay. But
It takes about 6 hours to get water to penetrate 48 inches. Okay, so 48 inches is 4 feet. That's that tall. So 6 hours of watering.
and that would be considered a deep.
Deep water only needs to be about 24 inches, no more than 24 inches.
So you could do 3 hours
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. What I would do is I would just calculate how much water. We can talk afterwards. I'll be happy to help you calculate how much water you need, how many gallons. It's real easy. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you tackle very overgrown, neglected shrubs like a rhododendron or something that's large masses?
Oh, that's a good question. Look at the pruning calendar. Figure out when's the optimum time, and then look at rejuvenation cuts to go in. With my shrubs, sometimes those big shrubs, my intent is to go and pull them out and put new plants in there. And my wife just doesn't. She says, it's going to take too long to before we have a screen, because that's what she wants to use as a screen. I don't want it as a screen. I want it to be a foundation plant where it covers the foundation, but it's beautiful and you can see the house. So we have differing opinions, but she's always right. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about, and it might be more for Ashley. Around here, like around Old North Durham, we have the problem with our crepe myrtles. We're losing a lot of them. Is that the ambrosia beetle? What is that?
No, that's crepe myrtle bark scale. If you look at our crepe myrtles, you'll see that they're black and they're covered in white spots.
Yeah.
That's the bark scale, and then the sooty mold is the black that's coming from the scale, insects giving off sugars. It's a problem of the crepe myrtles being both stressed because of really tight planting areas. Like you'll see them planted in
The sidewalk.
a sidewalk,
Yeah.
health strip this wide. They're the only tree that could possibly even kind of survive in that, and so the city has chosen them, which I actually think is a fair choice because it's that or nothing. But it's stress and it's way too many crepe myrtles, right? So
Yeah.
we have a huge population that can basically support these pests, and then we have these stressed trees that are going to attract the pests. And so I think it's just one of those things where
So the bark scale, they're moving from tree to tree.
yeah, and I think it's going to be basically letting those trees live for however long, taking them out, and if you even want a tree there, replacing it.
Yeah.
With the same
With
thing.
another crepe myrtle.
Yeah, and just knowing like it's a crepe myrtle or nothing, and it's a crepe myrtle with a short lifespan or nothing, which I think is a fair choice, right? But like reasonable minds could differ on that.
But I also think that y'all could probably use an insecticide, a systemic insecticide would also help with that because it's taken up into the plant. But the issue again goes back to the pollinators. When you treat them, it has to be treated at the right time. It has to be treated by a professional who knows what they're doing. Which most people have one or two in front of their house, and they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and like the city managed trees, the city's not going to do that. Right, like and so for your own trees though, there are ways that we can like help you, but for the city managed trees, that's just like the math they've done is it's easier to replace than constantly be treating.
Yes.
I have a weird question.